Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Miller, Senior Director of Education and Community Engagement at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Thank all of you for joining us. June is Black Music Appreciation Month, an annual celebration of African American music in the United States. And in this webinar, we will honor the history and legacy of music derived from the African diaspora. We are joined by an outstanding panel. I respect everyone on this panel greatly. We have Dr. Everett McCorvey, who is a soloist, conductor, and professor of voice. He is the founder and music director of the American Spiritual Ensemble, the director and executive producer of University of Kentucky Opera Theater, president of Global Creative Connections, and the artistic director of the National Chorale. Thank you for joining us, Dr. McCorvey.
Thank you so
We
much for
also
having me.
thank you. We also have with us Rissi Palmer, a country pop and R&B soul music artist. She debuted in 2007 with the single "Country Girl," which made her the first. Let me repeat, the first African American woman to chart a country song since Dona Mason in 1987. She is the host of her own radio show, Color Me Country, with Rissi Palmer on Apple Music Country, and the founder of the Color Me Country Artists Grant Fund, designed to support new country artists of color. Thank you for joining us, Rissi. You're welcome. And you were on mute, just to let you know, which is fine.
Thank you for having me. Sorry.
You're welcome. Thank you. We also have joining us Jacqueline Patrice Hudson. She is a doctoral candidate in the American Cultural Studies at Bowling Green State University. While working on a dissertation entitled "I Am Every Black Woman, Negotiating Intersectionality in the Music Industry." She continues to work on her curatorial and historic preservation projects. She is a wonderful resource for many of us in the museum field. So it's a deeply great to have Jackie joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
And joining us off camera, but in audio, is Will Jones. He is an entrepreneur who owns and operates Blaze for Glory Music Group, LLC, restructured in 2017 as B4GMG. It's a music service company that provides management, marketing, and publishing services for artists, DJs, producers, media personalities, and other audio content creators. Thank you for joining us, Will.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And so, for those that are joining us, definitely want to make sure that for those that might be joining us for the first time, you're more than welcome to answer some questions in the ask them questions in the chat or comment. We will try to address them as we go along with our conversation. As always, on behalf of our executive team and board, we want to thank all of you for joining us as well as the panel. And so we're looking forward to a great conversation with the backdrop of Black History Month. What I want to start off is just an easy question for everyone, and I'm going to start out with you, Dr. McCorvey, if you don't mind. But can you unpack the significance of music in your life?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I have to say that my life was totally impacted by music, and it was the music of the civil rights movement. I grew up in the 60s with during the civil rights movement, and my father was a deacon at the church where Reverend David Abernathy was the minister in Montgomery, Alabama. We lived about 2 blocks from the home of where Martin Luther King lived when he was in Montgomery. And my parents were very involved with the civil rights movement. And so I heard as a child so many wonderful sermons and so much wonderful music. And I definitely would call it music of change. as it was music that informed and empowered people during the civil rights movement. And Martin Luther King was a lover of spirituals and would quote spirituals in his sermons. And many of the great choirs came through, student choirs came through Montgomery, Alabama in support of the civil rights movement. And so my father's church at First Baptist Church was one of the larger auditoriums in the city. Martin Luther King's church was Dexter Avenue, which was a smaller church. And so most of those iconic photos that you saw of the civil rights movement inside were at my dad's church. And so this music affected me greatly. And as I became an older person and then a professional musician, I felt like the music of spirituals could not be lost. And so I started 26 years ago now, the American Spiritual Ensemble. And the mission of that group is to keep the American Negro spiritual alive. And so we have the great pleasure of traveling throughout the world celebrating this music and telling their stories. And so it was the formative years, my years growing up in Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama, during the civil rights movement that really helped me to decide that this was going to be my life's work. So I'm always excited to talk about it.
Thank you. And Rissi, for you?
I have to say, I was influenced a lot by music that came before me. And I always have been. There's something about the time that Dr. McCorvey was talking about as far as the 60s and the 70s. I'm an 80s baby, but in my house, my parents played all the records. And so we listened to Phoebe Snow and we listened to James Taylor and Patsy Cline. And I was really and Aretha Franklin and Shaka Khan and like all that kind of thing. So like, I was really fortunate that I grew up in a house where nothing was off limits. So we could listen to everything. We could listen to country with the same fervor and excitement that we listened to the OJs. And so and because of that, I think my music is extremely diverse, musically diverse for that reason. And so, I thank my parents and of course, gospel music. Like I grew up, I don't know a lot of us that didn't grow up singing in the church. And so, I grew up singing in church and singing gospel. And that was my first exposure to the stage and being in front of a microphone. And so, yeah, it's, like music has in so many ways transformed and formed my life. And, I can't say enough about it. Like it really has, in every aspect. And like, I watch my children now and I play the same types of records that were played for me. And like my kids are now, they can recognize my child was singing Brick House the other day. She's 2. And so it's, music is extremely powerful in that way. And I'm just very thankful that I grew up in a house where my parents recognized that. They weren't musicians, but they recognized the power of music.
Thank you. And for you, Jackie, how significant has music been for you in your life?
Well, first of all, I always say music is like the soundtrack of our lives. And so music has impacted me in regards to how, if I listen to one song, it reminds me of this certain part of my life, or when I was a kid, or when I was in college, or hanging out with my friends or whatnot. And my first exposure with music, particularly Black music, is same as Rissi's, is my parents cleaning up the house on Saturday mornings or going on a road trip to grandma's or whatnot, or going to a family reunion. So it definitely, I was obsessed with it, even though I didn't really know like the contents of the lyrics, but it was just so soulful. So I knew that if it moved my parents, then I should know, I should check this music out too. So, and then it traveled into working in the music industry. I used to work at a radio. I used to work at a record company. I worked at a radio station. I worked in music retail. So it's definitely in my, in my blood and soul and all that good stuff. So, and then, working on most of my content, whether it's um, working on expositions or working on my dissertation, it definitely has been involved with music. So what they say, music is life. Yeah, music is life.
Thank you, Jackie. And you will. Can you unpack as far as how music has been significant in your life?
Absolutely, man. I can go on for days, but respecting everyone's time, kind of the synopsis is, I wish I was always one of those people that can sing, rap, play instruments. I'm not. I've always been one that to be of service to people. So in that sense, I've always been around people that have had these extraordinary abilities musically that I've always wanted to help in some type of capacity. A lot of times I run into artists and personalities, they're extremely talented at what they do, but they don't have the patience to learn the business side, or they don't know how, or it seems overwhelming. Well, that's where I've always gotten a lot of my passion, specifically in where and how music was significant to me is, again, it goes back to what some of the others were saying, whereas I've always identified songs with memories, events, things of significance in my life. Man, I can tell you, back to, my first cassette tape that I had. I played it so much, it popped out the tape deck, and my mom trying to fix it for me, and then she's playing it back, and she like, "What's this?" Like, nah, you can't listen to that. It's Bone Thugs and Harmony, East 1999, or being with my aunt from the islands, and she's playing like, Janet Jackson's, all her albums, and then Vogue, and introducing me to that, or, you know, um, even earlier, like, what was said, being in the Black church, and you hearing those hymns and those songs and old Negro spirituals and contemporary music. It just, the list goes on and on. I mean, I have albums I can even tell you to this day that have been significant, just like in my upbringing, to heartbreak, to, getting through, my collegiate years on, like, man, I'm tired, but, it's this one song or this one album that's pushing me through. And, those have been the things that I'm most proud of, that I can say have been significant to me, and that still are, even up to now, which is why, I'm happy to help out artists in any way I'm able to.
Thank you, thank you. I will have to. Jackie mentioned about cleaning the house with the music. That I don't know, and I don't know if that's something just specifically with Black culture, but absolutely. I remember for me, cleaning the house, and I'm gonna go a little bit further than the cassette tapes. My parents had an 8-track player, and sometimes when that 8-track player it gets a little loose, you got to put a piece of paper under so that you can kind of keep the 8-track so it line up just right. And I remember BT Express. A lot of hip hop artists sampled a lot of the music from BT Express, but I remember cleaning the house, vacuuming, dusting, to that sound just filling up the house. And so that is something definitely I finally remember, especially a relationship with music, cleaning the house to BT Express. Yeah. And so what I want to do is get into my next question. This is for Dr. McCurvey and Rissi, because you're so tied with music. What aspects of the music that you create do you see connected to African culture in that legacy? And so if you can unpack that for me a little bit.
Well, I want to comment on what Rissi was saying earlier about how in her household she was able to experience all types of music. And I think that that's part of our uniqueness, in that we have been exposed to so many genres of music and so many types of music. And we have been able to create in all of those genres. And so, you know, what I find a lot of times in musicians, and especially black musicians, I think and I think it's exactly what Rissi was talking about and what you were just saying, Chris. We grew up with all of these types of music, and we were not between our church and, you know, our different environments, we were encouraged to use our talents to be able to experiment and try this sort of music. My parents were not musically inclined, but they noticed early in my life that I had a musical talent. And so they tried to expose me to all types of music. And what I have found with music is that it has been the great equalizer in our country. You know, the talent sort of equalizes all fields, because as all of these artists can talk about, you know, access, because of the talent that we have been fortunate enough to bring to our communities and to our environments, have made possible for us to be able to go out, meet people, and be involved socially, politically, culturally, and to help make change in our community, and to further the cause of what we're doing in music. And so that impact for me was very strong, because my parents made that possible, and because of the talents that we hear. You know, if you think of pop music, you know, well, let's start with the, you know, spirituals, which I call the mother music. So from spirituals, jazz, blues, gospel, all grew out of this form. Then popular music grew out of this form. And so we were able to experience these transitions throughout our history, starting 400 years ago. And so it's been part of the culture of Black folks for a long time. And it has been our form of expression. And so, so it has totally informed the way we present the music that we present.
I just want to, I mean, everything that you just said, all of it. Um, and then in my particular field with country music, one of the fun things about my job is that I get to tell people how wrong they are all the time. And it makes me so happy. No, I mean, country music, when you at first blush, if you're not a student of music or of American culture, like deeply, then you would, at first blush, it's like, what do Black people have to do with country music? And it's like, as with a lot of things, we're kind of the bedrock. And so one of the biggest instruments that people think of as country, the banjo, is an African instrument. And not only that, the style of fiddling, like these are just facts that I found in doing research for my show. The style of fiddling that we know is a derivative of enslaved people and Irish people. And so it's a mixture of all these things. Country music is like jazz, in that it is one of the most thoroughly American art forms. And when I say that, I mean everybody that came here, whether you were already here, indigenous people, you were a immigrant, or you were brought here enslaved, everyone contributed to the music and made it what it is today. You hear mariachi horns in country music, that's Latinx people. And you hear the gospel influences, the blues influences, that's us. And like people like to say that country music is white man's blues. No, country music is blues with a twang, and it belongs to all of us. And gosh, I mean, like so many of the big icons of country music, like the Carter family. The Carter family learned how to play their distinctive guitar licks from a Black preacher. Their first A&R person was a Black preacher by the name of Leslie Riddle. And D. Ford Bailey is the first sound that you heard when you listened to the Grand Ole Opry on the radio. And T. Todd Payne taught Hank Williams how to play the guitar. And so, like, a lot of the things that people think, if you say that you're influenced by Hank Williams, then you've been influenced by a Black man. If you say that you've been influenced by the Carter family, you've been inspired by gospel and you've been inspired by a Black man and Black people. And if you pick up a banjo, guess what? You've been inspired and taught by Black people. So thank Africa. So it's it's really fun, and it's one of my favorite, it's one of the joys of my life, quite honestly, to find these things and to be able to share them, because I hate that the marketing and the PR has been so good all these years to make people think that country music only belongs to one type of people.
Well, I want to add something to that too, because I think that, and I know we're talking about this a little later, just in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement and how all of a sudden there's a sense of enlightenment that's happening in our culture. As so many people will say, "Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that the banjo was inspired by blacks in our country. I didn't know this about." And I think it's because the textbooks have left that out, because it's something that they didn't want people to know. And so we are having to learn now all of these things. Did Elvis Presley get there by himself? Or did he hear that music in the Black clubs before it became? But because Elvis Presley had access, then all of a sudden he was able to take this music and go and make it a worldwide phenomenon. And I think that that's what you're talking about in terms of how, because Blacks did not have the access and the ability to be able to do this on their own, and did not have the help in order to make this happen, then a lot of these things were co-opted and then taken on and done. And now I think what's going to happen over the next 10 years or the next 10 to 20 years is the textbooks are going to change. The story is going to change now that I think so many people are being enlightened by, Juneteenth. How long has Juneteenth been around?
Right.
156 years.
That's what I'm talking about. And so, but there's an enlightenment that's happening now where people of all colors are going back and saying, wait a minute, let's get the real story of how this started.
Absolutely. And you're talking about being left out now. I want to make sure that, I want to talk about the role of Black women when we talk about music. And so this question is for Jackie, and then Rissi as well can chime in. Can you provide your perspective of the impact and the role of Black women in the music industry over time, and then, even currently?
Right. Well, basically, that's my dissertation. So I can totally say, do this dissertation on that fact. But for time, they definitely have had an impact on the music industry. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was basically, her guitar playing influenced these, these, I guess, quote unquote gods of rock and roll. Like the Rolling Stones have mentioned that Miss Thorpe was an early influence. So even Big Mama Thornton and Ruth Brown, she was instrumental in the beginning of Atlantic Records. So, and then there's like Memphis Minnie, her guitar playing was very instrumental and influential on rock and roll as well. So it's crazy that these women and these Black women were so not influential in the industry, but they weren't properly recognized or properly credited for their contributions to the industry. So and then I think it was mentioned before about Aretha Franklin, just her and Nina Simone during the 60s, where Nina Simone was the premier artist on protest music, and then Aretha Franklin was, people a little people didn't know that Aretha Franklin was an accomplished pianist. So it's like, and then not only in front, like behind the microphone, it's also it have been an evolution of, well, not say evolution, but had been a lack of Black women in leadership at these record companies. So I mean, we're getting to a point where we're starting to get, see more visibility of um, Black women behind, like I guess you would say in the C-level um, offices at these record companies, but it's we still have a long way to go. And I think having those, having the Black women in these key positions will hopefully help push the envelope on supporting more Black women in the industry.
Uh, Again, everything she said. And again, speaking specifically to my portion of the industry, Black women have always acted as the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. You have when naming like the big Black artists in country music, it's always been men mostly. It's Charlie Pride, it's Darius Rucker, it's now Jimmy Allen and Kane Brown, and there's Mickey, there was me, and then but before us, there was Linda Martell, who was the counterpoint to Charlie Pride. She came out the same year that he came out. But you don't ever hear anybody talk about her a lot. Like she's being talked about now, thank God. But for the longest time, you didn't hear about her. And there have been many women since her. And the problem is, country music has, for a long time, had a woman problem. It hasn't been great for white women either, but it really has not been great for us, for women of color. And, I think once they figure out how to rectify that, then that's when it's going to change for everybody. Like as in most aspects of the culture, when Black women get elevated, a rising tide lifts all ships. Like it changes the situation for everyone. And so, like Jada Watson, Dr. Jada Watson, she's incredible. She just did some research on radio airplay. In 10 years, Black women have seen 0.02% of country music airplay in the past 10 years. And combined, BIPOC artists, male and female, have only seen 0.5% in the last 10 years. And so again, like I said, we're the canary in the coal mine.
Canary in the coal mine. I haven't heard that phrasing. I'm gonna hold on to that one. I will say it's fascinating too. I'm a '70s baby, so I grew up during the hip hop generation, and the birth of hip hop came from Sylvia Robinson, who was the executive for Sugar Hill Records. And so I find that dynamic, especially in a genre that has been dominated. To see that from the origins beginning that there was a woman in the executive capacity at the origins of it. I will say this, in this question for Will, to kind of look at the evolution of our music to this day. And so, Will, if you could share with us how, from your perspective, how has Black music evolved up to the current times?
Absolutely. I mean, I could speak more so from kind of the music business end of it. What's exciting to see actually is at the core root of it all is it's about the music. But the exciting part for me is you're learning that a lot of artists nowadays they're becoming and are they're brands. So they realize and recognize the importance of I have to make sure, and not to say that they haven't in the past, but I think it's just more consciously aware that they're consciously aware of it. Sorry. And so they're like, I have to make sure that I'm authentic about my art, but that, I create the narrative of how I want people to perceive my music so that you're not just hearing the music itself, but you know what the story is behind it. They're more aware of, okay, I make this type of music. I may not just be in that box, but this is maybe more so my lane, where if I want to touch another audience, I may want to collaborate with this person, go for this type of sound from this producer, things like that. It's just, again, you have these, artists throughout the times who have, kind of taken from these genres. I mean, we all know, just like, again, earlier it was mentioned, about Elvis Presley. He got his sound from Chuck Berry, and then, hip hop spawned from disco, and then, you just had all of these genres that came from genres that originated from Black culture. But I think now it's evolved into artists being more business minded, more so, okay, how can I make this into a business? How can I make it work for me as a brand? What do I want my brand to convey across my audience, my listeners? What is the emotion that I want them to get when they hear me as an artist? And that's what I think is more so of emphasis now, along with the art.
Yeah, thank you, Will. And I know this was mentioned a little bit in the conversation, and I want to talk about protest music. Often, protest music kind of goes back to the 60s, 50s, but there's a broader span when you look at protest music, from Go Down Moses to Strange Fruit, to Mississippi Goddamn, to What's Going On, to Fight the Power, to Kendrick Lamar's All Right. Nearly every generation has had a protest song or music that kind of spoke to that generation. And so Jackie, what is your perspective on that legacy? And is there a favorite protest song that that you feel that is very significant to you?
I mean, like, well, your analogy or you naming all those songs is a perfect example of the evolution of the protest song. Like, it could be in, it can go back to spirituals where enslaved people sang to each other as a form of communication. So, and then it just like goes and it goes and it just like it's fit for the time. So that's one of the things that I really love about the evolution of protest music, because it just fits for the time. So I mean, that's just basically it. And my favorite protest song is I have many, but if I had to choose one, it would be Public Enemy's "Fight the Power." It's full of it's full of truth. It's full of rage. It's full of it's kind of got that music that kind of want to galvanize and fight what's right for African Americans. So and just to see them see Chuck D and Flavor Flav and the S1Ws, I think that's what and then also just to see them on stage performing that, and you just feel like you just need to do something. You just get into the mood, in that mood, and just want to say, hey, what can I do? So I think the levity that they present in that song is why I love that particular song.
I would have to agree with you. He had that famous line, Elvis is a hero to most, but he never meant to me.
Right.
And so speaking of that, and since I live in Ohio, I'll be remiss, the Isley Brothers, Lincoln Heights,
Yes.
they also had a song
Yes.
called Fight the Power.
Exactly.
That was very, militant, very, very forward thinking as far as those dynamics to the social realities.
And what I like about Chuck D, Chuck D said that, rap music is like the CNN, is like the Black CNN. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of that song.
Absolutely. Now, Rissi, if and I encourage everyone, go to check out this brilliant, beautiful woman's website, Rissi Palmer. When I first went to your website, you have a video of your song Seeds. And the first time I saw that, I was like, in my mind, I said, that's a protest song.
Yes.
The video, the imagery. And so my question to you is, do you consider it a protest song, and why or why not?
Oh, it absolutely was a protest song, is a protest song, and the video, even more so. Everything that
Mm.
I didn't say in the song is in the video. And part of the reason why I put it on the website front and center is like, if you're coming and you don't know who I am or what I'm about, turn back now. um, yeah, because it's there's children. If you haven't seen it, there are we talk about the children in the cages, and
Hmm.
we talk about police brutality in the video and all that. The song was written in 2014. I wrote it. I was born in Pennsylvania, but I grew up in Missouri, in Eureka, Missouri, and I am a product of the desegregation, voluntary desegregation program in St. Louis. And so kids were bused in, Black children were bused into the suburbs to go to school, and not vice versa. And yeah, that's a whole other separate conversation for another day. But so many of my friends are from the Ferguson, Missouri community and people that I grew up with. And I remember seeing pictures of Michael Brown laying in the middle of the street before it became national news because I saw it on Facebook. And I watched as, the case went on, and the early seeds of what we now know as Black Lives Matter and all that were sown during that time. And I was especially moved the night that the grand jury decided not to press charges against the officer that killed him, and the subsequent uprisings that happened in Ferguson. And I live in North Carolina now, and I had at the time a small child. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go, but I wanted to say something. And so I saw this incredible quote. They tried to cut us down. They didn't know that we were seeds. And I decided that that's what was going to be the basis of what I was going to talk about. And yeah, so that's what that song was about. And it was also, there's a line in there that no wall can block us. This is around the same time that He Who Shall Not Be Named was talking about putting walls up. And everybody was build the wall, build the wall. And so yeah, it was my way of like, y'all, this is crazy. And like we don't have to do this. And yeah, I think that unfortunately, it's a burden that people of color, Black people especially, have always had to carry, to say these things and to portray these messages. And I felt the responsibility a lot heavier than I think a lot of my peers do. In that, I feel like it's irresponsible to be an artist in this time and not to say something about what's going on. So yeah, it definitely is a protest song, and it was meant to be that way. And yeah.
I think for many of us, is a phrase we not only go to our jobs, but we also go with the responsibility. So I think you're talking about, not only are you passionate about your artistry as a musician and singer, but you also have a responsibility
Yes.
to the community that you come from, and so you felt compelled to challenge, what was going on through song. And so I can definitely relate to that. Um, Dr. McCorvey, in with the same respect, spirituals, and in preparing for this, I took classes to where, um, just sharing out a little bit, I've played, cello, saxophone, drums, I sung in choir, and so spirituals uh, have always been, from the historical context, have been always been significant. And I've recently changed my perspective in looking at them like, no, these were protest songs, converged with faith and religion. And so my question, what are your thoughts about looking at spirituals actually as protest songs? What is your perspective on that?
Well, I totally agree with you. They are protest songs, and they're just couched in very beautiful melodies. But you know what? They have a powerful meaning, and they were some of the first protest songs in this country. Again, you have to think that a people and enslaved people were brought here against their will and forced to, to learn a total new way of communicating. And singing was allowed because slave masters didn't think of singing as a threat. And they also, the slave masters realized that when the enslaved sang, they also produced more work. And so what the slave masters did not know is that the enslaved had figured out a very sophisticated way of communicating and not only telling their stories, but making plans for escape, making plans for uh, different things that were going to happen, all through the beauty of singing. And so when the 16-hour days got to be really hard, it was the singing that helped to transport these people to a place where they could continue to do what they're doing. And that's exactly what the spiritual did during the civil rights movement. And that's why Martin Luther King was um, was very interested in using the spiritual as the songs of protest. As they marched, they sang, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. Ain't gonna let Jim Crow turn me round. Ain't gonna let Bull Connor turn me round." I mean, it gave a people power, it gave them strength and hope for the future. And so, without these spirituals and without the power of singing and communal singing, where everybody was involved, who knows what would have happened with, with slavery, and would our people have made it? And would the civil rights movement, this nonviolent movement, been so effective were it not for these protest songs called spirituals? One of the spirituals that Martin Luther King sang and talked about a lot and used in his sermons a lot was a spiritual entitled "Walk Together, Children. Don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land." And when I started the American Spiritual Ensemble, I started our first concert with "Walk Together, Children." And even today, 25 years, 26 years later, we open our concerts with "Walk Together, Children. Don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land." And so these beautiful, haunting melodies that were given to our ancestors to help them to survive is now the basis of what we know today as American music. And so it's America's first major protest song.
And actually, Dr. McCurdy, I want to stay with you for a little bit, because I want to talk about, we talk about protest, but also hope and uplift in music. From my understanding, especially spirituals, was also not only used to communicate a message, but it was also to uplift and elevate your spirit over the hardship that you were dealing with. If we're talking about enslavement, we're talking about out there in the field. If we're talking about the civil rights, movement, you're talking about marching miles in suits and hard bottom shoes.
That's
I
right.
mean, I can't wait to get home to take my shoes off. So I can't imagine marching with
right.
hard bottom shoes for miles upon miles. And I'm gonna talk. We shall overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the song that helped ignite and defend the civil rights movement of the 60s, a song that the Library of Congress has labeled the most powerful song of the 20th century, was actually written by Louise Sunfire, who was a music minister of Revelation Baptist Church right here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on the west end of Cincinnati. Can you expound about the significance of that song, and also talk about a little bit more about the project that you've been working on, that you did some filming at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center?
Well, I'll start a little bit with the "We Shall Overcome" was a song that, of course, I heard my entire life in Montgomery, Alabama, as people were marching. My parents lived, just a few blocks from downtown, and every march you would hear the people singing "We Shall Overcome." And Martin Luther King heard that song in the early '60s. There was a school called the Highlander Folk School, and it was in Monteagle, Tennessee. And it was a place where people would go. It started off sort of as a business school to help business executives in terms of conflict resolution. But it was a place that Martin Luther King went to also to learn about nonviolent conflict resolution. And there's a very famous day when Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Ralph Abernathy, the folk singer Pete Seeger were all at the school, and Martin Luther King really responded to the "We Shall Overcome." And at the time that they were at the Highlander School, Rosa Parks had not decided what she was going to do as her nonviolent action, which of course we knew about a year later what that was, in sitting on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama. But they were all, that was a place where they all heard that song. And of course, the rest of the history of that song is now tied to the civil rights movement for forever. But you are exactly right, Chris. Can you imagine, you know, being one, well dressed, walking in very hot temperatures, marching, singing, and letting the power of music and the power of song change a nation? It's amazing.
Thank
And
you.
I'll,
Thank
I'll
you.
tell you, oh, and I want to tell you about our project that we're working on right
Mhm.
now with the American Spiritual Ensemble. We have just finished a film called In Their Own Words, The Power of the Spirituals, and we filmed it, some of it, thanks to you and your staff at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, where we took these spirituals and we added text to them, and we added stories to them. And author Eileen Gunther has written a book called The Power of Spirituals. And we took some of the, where she's done research of thousands of slave narratives. And we took some of those slave narratives, we read those, and then we sang the music, the spirituals that related to those slave narratives. And it was very, very powerful because it brought those narratives to life, and it brought the spirituals to life. But I tell you, one of the things that I'm excited about what the music is going to be that comes out of the Black Lives Matter movement, you know,
Mm.
over the next 5 and 10 years, because that's going to be the modern protest music that I'm really looking forward, as creative artists all over the world, but certainly artists of color who have had the type of experience that Rissi was talking about, will be able to start writing music and and transporting that from the experience of the Black Lives movement to the history of our country through music. And so I can't wait to see what that's going to be.
Absolutely. I think some of that, is being revealed through various, different artists. I've seen, current, hip hop artists really taking up the mantle to address these social realities through their song. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think we're in the midst of that, that emergence of that music. When you think about hope and uplift, and so my question, this is for, Will. I'll have Will go first and then follow up with Jackie and Reese. What are your go-to songs, or maybe songs that are overlooked, that you go to for hope and uplift? When we are going through those struggles, times, whether they are personal, where they're collective because of the state of our society is in. And so, what is a song, or that you feel that really resonates with you? And I'll begin with Will.
So from a personal standpoint, my some of my go-tos include Jill Scott's "I Keep." Man, I just there was a point in time where I would get up, you know, and that was, you know, after I do my thing spiritually, pray, meditate, things of that nature, I throw that on. That the album, I believe it was called, no, not Life is Golden. I can't recall the name of the album right now, but that's what the song is on, or that's what the name of the song is on the album. And then kind of some other ones like Nipsey Hussle's Motivation featuring Kendrick Lamar. And then even today, you have your contemporary hip hop artists such as even like Lil Baby with Bigger Picture. That you know, he again goes
Didn't he
back.
just didn't he just win like songwriter of the year, I believe?
I believe so, yeah. But I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
even going back to things where I mentioned earlier, like thinking of your brand overall as an artist. You know, if you saw the video, you know, they're literally doing the video during a Black Lives Matter protest down in Atlanta, and proceeds he had generated, or revenue he had generated from the song, he donated to National Association of Black Journalists. He donated to the Black Lives Matter some chapter down in Atlanta. So these are just some of the things where you'll hear that, you know, some of the explicit content on some of the material. I'll say that, but when you take an even deeper look into you know, just the music overall and these artists and what they're about, and again them willing to tell their own narratives, you really know and understand why they may speak the things that they do, and get better insight onto that. Even with that, you know, kind of another song that I think gets or was overlooked was, you know, Donald Glover's "This Is America." Visuals behind that extremely just powerful. I mean, the way, you know, that the video opened up, you know, the song just addressed a lot of the different things that went on as far as from America's standpoint, like trying to hide you know, the things that this country has done, but yet, you know, try to glamorize that, you know, this is the land of the free, liberty, etc. But this is what's really going on. And from a visual perspective, he sheds light on that. And these are the things that I think a lot of times, because, you know, the with it being hip hop and, you know, the language and things, you know, it's not all the time the best, but again, looking at overall, what is the brand trying to convey, you know, from the visuals, what is the person doing behind the scenes, what allegiances and alliances they're partnering with, you know, with people to um, push like these social issues and things of that nature. I mean, like we were just saying with, you know, about Lil Baby, he, you know, was with, you know, some congressmen and lawmakers on Capitol Hill and at the White House, you know, because he understands his platform and knows and recognizes that there are people his age and younger, even a little older, that may identify with him, that he knows he has a voice that appeals to, you know, these people. So, you know, even with the music, those are some of the things again that stand out that I think a lot of times people tend to overlook.
Thank you, Will. And Jackie, for you?
I have two, and they're both have spiritual undertones. The first one is, I mean, we heard it all the time. Like you couldn't escape it. "Happy" by Pharrell. Like it's like I feel like it's super. You know, when I'm happy and I want to get, you know, like, you know, spiritually fed, I listen to that song. And you know, because you know, at some point you start clapping, and it's kind of have that all the elements of like being in church. So and I think even in the video he's like singing with a choir. So I think that's one, you know, one. And then the other one is uh "Ain't No Need to Worry" with Wyan Brothers and the way like Wyan Brothers and the Winans and Anita Baker. Like I listened to that song as a kid, and it was just something special about that song. But you know, when you're a kid, you don't really understand the lyrics. But as an adult, I remember, you know, just this quick story. I remember when Walter Payton died, and they played that song, and for some reason it just hit me. It just like hit me. It hit that song hit me totally different. So those two songs are like the two that I, you know, are my go-tos.
Oh, I was gonna. um, I have three. One is Allison Russell, Barley, and if you don't know, it's she did it with her partner, Birds of Chicago is the name of their band, and Liz Wright did a really brilliant cover of it on her last record, Grace. But I mean, the words are just as the wind that bends the barley shall not break me. As my mother told me, this I know and I see. And I feel like that's been like the theme song for like the last year, the last 2 years, hell, the last 400. But it's a really great it's a really great motivational, like reminding me like you're not facing anything that hasn't been seen before. So just keep pushing. And then I love there's been just a lot of really great music in the last year, like Wale, Sumi. Love that song. Love the visual to that song. And it's like, and it didn't really get, I don't think, the airplay that it should have gotten, but oh, it's so good. It's so good. And then you've mentioned it already, Chris, Kendrick Lamar. All right. Like, I can't tell you how many times I quote that song on a regular basis. I talk about it on my show, which is funny because I know a lot of my listeners are like, who is Kendrick? What? But yeah, I love that song. And I think that sums it up. Everything in that song just sums up what we're facing, what we're going through, what we have to do to go forward. And yeah, if God got us, then we're gonna be all right. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I thank you for sharing. I will say, for me, Sounds of Blackness, Optimistic. That's one song that, every time I hear it, in the collection of voices with the choir, it resonates with. I would say, through the '90s, anything that dealt with X Clan. And for those that don't know X Clan was my group. Them brothers. I mean, they brought the Afrocentric dress. We were wearing the medallions with the African symbol, and he would say the red, the black, and the green with the key. I mean, it was just, his voice and what they represented meant a lot to me. In contemporary, there's an artist by the name of D Smoke, and he has a song called Black Habits. And that song is something, it's a song that I probably play at least once or twice a week. And it's really, you talk about the visuals for it. That particular video, he is actually on a plantation. It was filmed on a plantation, and it resonates quite a bit. It has a very powerful, strong message, and it's also very spiritual as well. It's connected. And so, absolutely, I just want to encourage people. Some of these artists that you mentioned, everyone has mentioned. I hope that people will take the time to really learn a bit more about them. We are getting close to our time. One question I has an additional question. I think we kind of covered it, talking about the burden of musicians and artists, playing a role of being a healer and reconciling the problems related to race in our society. I think we kind of conveyed that through the comments. I mean, through our conversation. And so, at this particular time, if there's any, closing words that you will have for those that will view this video that are currently live, and then if there's anyone that have any questions at this time, now's the time to have your question in the chat before we close. But I will start with Will. If there's any closing remarks that you have.
I would just say, first off, thank you for hosting this discussion, Chris. Things like this are extremely powerful, especially during the time of Black Music Month. It's becoming more and more. I don't popular is the wrong word, but people are becoming more familiar with it. I'll say, and with things like this and Juneteenth. I mean, we need more of this for people to know what the history of our culture is. So it's definitely important. please keep doing what you're doing down there. You're doing powerful work. And to the other panelists on here, very insightful conversation. It's been a pleasure speaking with you all.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Will. And Jackie?
So again, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. This is like my first like grown up like panel discussion thing. So so I appreciate that we, this subject was my very first one. So, but seriously, again, thank you. It's very insightful information. It's great to talk amongst colleagues and who has the, same passion about Black music as I do. And then also I want to, end by saying, and Dr. McCorvey mentioned it, allude to it earlier, is Black music is American music.
And I believe she cued you up, Dr. McCorvey.
Amen to that. I'm telling you, thank you for saying it because it's American music. It's not music of just one group of people. This music is for all of America, and I say that about the spirituals all the time. They say, "Is this music that Black people should sing?" I was like, "This is American music. It was born here. It was created here. Created during a very difficult time in our history, but it's American music. No other country can lay claim for this music, and we have so many styles. Rissi mentioned jazz and blues, gospel, pop. This is American music that was started in a difficult time in our country, but now has become the music that defines what America is about. And so what I would just like to say is I hope that you all, these artists and artists who are listening, just keep creating. And as you are now learning more of the history of your people, to be proud of what our people have done throughout history and celebrate that and just keep creating. These are our tools where we can tell the story. And so I'm just delighted to be here today. I'm so inspired, and listening to you all, it's been very exciting. So thank you for having me as part of this panel.
No, thank you. And Rissi, any final remarks you would like to make?
It always makes me really happy to be on a panel with smart people because I feel like I walk away even smart, like I walk away like, with new ammunition in my belt. So I thank you all for just being like great and knowledge and full of knowledge and that sort of thing. Thank you for including me in this discussion. I'm glad that we can have these discussions and that this information is out here and it's all out here. And I would implore everyone that's listening and anyone that watches in the future, like, just go and look some of this stuff up. It's incredible, the things that you'll find. And I mean, on a daily basis, I find myself being blown away by some of the things that I'm reading and finding just about my genre. And we have a lot to be proud of. We have a lot um, to take ownership of and be confident in and stand very proud in. And so Black music is American music, is music. And so, yeah, we did that. So
Absolutely. Amen to that. One of the things I learned in curating this opportunity is that Black music is boundless. There is no genre of music that has not been touched by the presence and influence of people of African descent. And so when we have that understanding, we understand that when we do listen to country music, you are listening to an extension of that African diaspora. When you're listening to jazz, you're listening to an extension of that African diaspora. The same goes for gospel, rock and roll, hip hop. And so it's very important for all of us in our society have that understanding of the contributions. And in many ways, people have sacrificed so much um, for us to enjoy the music, but also to be uplifted and elevated by it. And so I just sincerely thank all of you for being a part, agreeing to be a part of this discussion. And so for those that are live and those joining us live, and for those that may be seeing the viewing of this later on, please stay invested with institutions. We do. There was a new museum in Memphis that's just opened up. The National Association of African Museum of African American Music. Just
Nashville.
opened
It's in
in
Nashville.
Nashville. Thank you, not Memphis, Nashville.
National Museum of African American Music.
Thank you, thank you. Take the time to, to support that museum and elevating those contributions, and take the time as well to invest opportunities to support us here at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. You can always donate, become a member. I encourage a membership at all. Every time I have an opportunity that helps supports not only us but also institutions, and so we can continue to have opportunities like this to have these meaningful discussions. I want to thank all of you again for joining us, and all of you have a blessed day. And for the rest of the month that's left, make sure you're playing some new music that you haven't listened to before, and looking up, as Rissi said, some of these artists, and so that you can download them. I don't know if people still buy CDs or not, but get engaged with the music and allow it to move you, to enlighten you. Thank you very much for joining us. All of you have a blessed day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.